Lose yourself in a good book. The Bord Gáis Energy Book Club.
Now, as we face into an exciting summer of sport with Euro 2016 and, of course, the Olympics in Rio in August to look forward to, we've set Niall Kelly, Deputy Editor of the 42.ie, the task of scooping out some of the best sports books on the market, even scoped about too. What have you found for us, Niall? Okay. I like the very first one, actually, the story of Adrian Doherty.
Yeah, this is Forever Young. This is Oliver Kay's new book. And Adrian Doherty is very much a forgotten man of football. For anybody who doesn't know the story, he would have been part of, or should have been part of, the great Manchester United class of '92 alongside Ryan Giggs, Paul Scholes, Bud, the Nevilles, all of those. And Adrian Doherty is from Strabane in County Tyrone.
What happened, do we know? He went over to United as a young player, obviously.
He was brought over at a very young age. He was spotted, I think, playing an under-14s game up north. And Alex Ferguson wasn't the only one to have his sights set on him. Nottingham Forest also wanted to bring him over, and Arsenal wanted to bring him over. And immediately Ferguson was on the phone to his father and he said, "We want to sign your son, bring him over." And it was said at the time that he was in the same youth team as Giggs, and it was said at the time that he had more potential than Giggs, he was going to be better than Giggs. There's a brilliant quote that, you know, he was like greased lightning. He could have been they had the same impact as George Best. So this is how highly he was thought of as a teenager. And even before Giggs broke into the United first team, Adrian Doherty was on the verge of it. He was in the squad, and in a game the week before, he injured his knee. This was, you have to remember, this is 20, 25 years ago. Yeah. Medical advances in football weren't quite what they are now. It turns out now that what happened was a cruciate ligament injury, which now is disruptive, very disruptive to.
But then it was,
would rarely end a football career. You know, there are people who have come back, a long history of people who have come back from cruciate injury at the moment. But at the time, it was much more significant. He never got to play first team football for Manchester United. He rehabbed it for 9 months and then came back, and immediately as he tried to come back 9 months later, he broke down again and was never able to play. Ended up going back to play a little bit of football for Derry City.
But of course, this story is unique. It's not just footballer breaks down and gets injured and retires.
No,
he was a very interesting and very troubled young man. Would that be fair?
Yeah, he was a real enigma, I think, for football in the 1990s. It was said that he used to show up to training wearing orange sweaters and carrying the guitar over his back. The quote is, he could have been the next George Best, but he probably would have preferred to be the next Bob Dylan.
Right, okay.
And if anybody goes and has a look on the internet today, there are clips of him playing All Along the Watchtower, the Bob Dylan classic, in clubs. And, you know, this was more his thing. I think he spent his first paycheck on a typewriter so he could type out poetry. And this is how he used to while away his time when, you know...
So he's a gifted sportsman with a bent towards the arts.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. And, you know, it's been said, like, Oliver Kay has actually had access to a lot of the writings and has passed them on to poetry experts. And, you know, this is not just...
So he was good?
Nonsense. This guy was actually very good at this as well. So he was a real enigma. Ferguson at the time tried to offer him a 5-year contract at the age of 17.
Yeah.
And Doherty turned it down. He said, "You know something, I'm not sure I'll still love football in 5 years.
Goodness me.
And they ended up agreeing on a 3-year contract. So there was this real sense that he was a brilliant footballer, but maybe his passions, his true passions lay elsewhere.
What happened to him?
So after he left Manchester United, he came back home, and he was obviously still at a very young age. He was played a handful of games for Derry City, but he never really had any interest in trying to kickstart his football career again. Instead, kind of following these ambitions, he did a few jobs elsewhere. And the story, sadly, which is only really being told in full now by Oliver Kay, has an incredibly tragic end when he went over to Holland to do some work, and within a very short space of time of moving to Holland, he was walking to work one morning and slipped and fell into a canal. And Adrian Doherty sadly couldn't swim. He drowned. He was in a coma for about a month, and he died a day short of his 27th birthday. And when you think of the promise that this young man had, and even Oliver Kay said, going back and talking to Alex Ferguson now, you can still see the fondness that Alex Ferguson had for him, and the regard in which Alex Ferguson held him as a footballer. It's an incredible story that's being told now for the first time.
The story of Adrian Doherty, football's lost genius, well worth a read. Euros, Northern Ireland on a high with their team going across now. They're gone. And this goes back to the team of 58, probably the last great team in the 80s, of course, the 82 World Cup. But the incredible story of Northern Ireland's greatest football team with some living legends still there.
Yeah, and a really fitting time for this book to come out because, you know, it's Northern Ireland's first tournament in 30 years, their first
Yeah.
time in the Euros. And this really encapsulates what made that team great. And it harkens back to a completely different era of football. You have to remember, so this is the great team, captained by Danny Blanchflower, you know, with Peter Doherty as their manager, Harry Gregg in goal. And set against the backdrop of the Munich air disaster.
Well, Harry Gregg was one of the survivors of that disaster.
Yeah, well, Harry Gregg famously is the man who was pulling people from the wreckage of the Munich air disaster, and then a couple of months later went on to and he was named goalkeeper of the tournament at the World Cup. Jackie Blanchflower, Danny's younger brother, should have been on this team, but of course was injured in that crash. And wasn't able to play. But there are so many phenomenal stories, and there's that harken back to that bygone era. As I'm saying, there was a game, Northern Ireland's playoff game against the Czech Republic, to determine whether they would get through to the quarter-finals. And the goalkeeper, Norman Upprichard, he injured his ankle early on, and the treatment for his injured ankle was the physio came on and poured 2 bottles of whiskey on it. Later on in the game, he injured his hand. He broke his hand, in fact, and because there were no substitutions allowed at the time, he played on with the broken, didn't concede a goal. Northern Ireland went through to the quarter-finals.
All right, incredible
so
stuff.
It really is, and encapsulates a lot of the team spirit of that era, and a handful of these men still alive, and it really is a fitting time to remember them in a book that does that.
Of course, Billy Bingham went on to Grace of managing Northern Ireland. He was in that squad as well. OK, that's the incredible untold story of Northern Ireland's greatest football team, which I believe is also a documentary being filmed.
There is,
with the survivors. And also, Today We Die a Little. Tell us about that, athletics.
Yes, this is the story of Emil Zatopek, who is probably widely regarded as the greatest runner of all time. He won 3 gold medals in the space of 8 days at the 1952 Olympics. He won 5,000 gold, 10,000 gold, and then decided, after winning the 2 of those, that for the first time in his life, he was going to run a marathon. Had never run a marathon before, and went and won marathon gold.
And when you marry that in with what was going on in his native Czechoslovakia and his role in that, you can see why he not just became a national hero, but an international hero.
Well, this is it, and it's actually funny. I was just thinking about this last night. We talked a lot, obviously, over the weekend about the great Muhammad Ali and how he's one of the very few people
who transcend the sport,
who took a political stand at the height of his powers against the Vietnam War. And it's funny, Zatopek, in a story that is not really that well known, did almost the exact same thing. And on the eve of the 1952 Olympics, the government wouldn't allow one of his teammates to travel for political reasons. And he said, well, if he doesn't go, I don't go. And it ended up being resolved. And it went on to be Zatopek's greatest achievement, winning those 3 gold medals. And unfortunately, the story also has a rather sad end. He would have been on the more democratic side of the Czech Communist Party. When Alexander Dubček brought in the Prague Spring reforms in the late 60s, he supported them when they were put down by the Soviet Union.
He was punished.
He was punished, he was exiled, he was forced to go and work in uranium mines, he was forced to go and work in refuse collection. And the second half of the story is really the story of how this Olympic legend, arguably the great Olympian and one of the great athletes of all time, was forced to live a life of exile, and his legacy was completely ruined. All
right, some very interesting books there to read in between the Euros, the GEA Championship and the Olympics to come, and whatever else is going on this summer. Thank you very much, sir. Pleasure as always. Talk again soon. Now, how would you like to be in with a chance of winning a book club goodie bag and Versus tablet? All you have to do is work out what famous author we're describing. We'll be giving out clues during book club every Tuesday, so if you don't work it out this morning, don't worry. Today's clue is this author's spouse shared the name with a shellfish. Any ideas? If you think you know the answer, send it to Ireland AM at tv3.ie, or you can post them to Bord Gáis Energy Book Club, TV3, Westgate Business Park, Ballymount, Dublin 24.
Lose yourself in a good book. The Bord Gáis Energy Book Club.
Now let's take the news with Rory.